They have 100,000 songs a day uploaded to their platform.
Companies that harness the creativity and data alongside each other grow twice as quickly as companies that don't.
So there's now more music released every day than used to come out in a year.
Data is not rocket science, it's actually harder.
Just to introduce myself, my name is David Lloyd. I'm the Managing Director of Data here at Wunderman Thompson. Work from this building and got a wonderful panel for you today. So I'm going to ask our panellists to introduce themselves, starting with Hazel.
Thank you so much. And I just firstly want to say this is the most comfortable chair I might have ever sat in on a panel. Normally they get you perched on something really like, don't get too comfortable, my friend. So kudos to the chair, in case everyone come try it after. My name is Hazel Savage. I was the CEO and co-founder of an artificial intelligence startup called Museo that was AI for the music industry. And I sold that company to Soundcloud in April this year. And so I'm now the VP of Music Intelligence at Soundcloud, heading up the London office. So yeah, that's the short version.
Thank you very much. And David.
I'm David Boyle, and my passion is data and also music, and therefore bringing data and music together. I love helping artists or labels or festivals or brands to really understand audiences and to find a strategy that goes and gets those audiences and conquers them. I'm a consultant. My background's in the music industry, and I also worked in television and book publishing and luxury goods. None of those were nearly as cool as music, so I'm back, and that's where my heart is.
Cool. And last but of course not least, Di.
Thank you. Totally agree with these chairs. I've had to do a panel before where I couldn't actually reach the stool because I'm such a shorty, so I'm very appreciative of this one. I'm Di Mayze. I'm Global Head of Data and AI for WPP. Total unembarrassed, loser about data, absolutely love data, obsess about data, talk about data, and have a quest to get everyone excited and to realize that data is creative and fun and engaging and the secret key to any growth that anybody is after.
Thank you very much. Well, I think you'll all agree we've got the right people for a panel about data. So we got that right. So I just wanted to set this up. We're going to be talking about data and the fan journey. And just as a bit of setup, we think about the music industry. Many years ago, it was very offline and analog. So you'd go out, you buy your records in a shop, you'd turn up to the venue, you'd pay your money on the door. Ultimately, it was probably an industry with quite a scarcity of data. And it wouldn't be a data panel if I didn't start dropping some data bombs on you. So I'm going to come out with some facts. So the global streaming total is 2.74 trillion in 2021. 2.74 trillion songs streamed. And that's up 26% from 2020 in just 1 year. 80% of the industry revenue is from streaming. Not only that, if you look at how venues managed now, the level of data and tracking that can be done through venues, through social media, has been absolutely revolutionized over the last few years. So really, as an industry, the music industry has had to catch up with that, has had to accelerate in terms of upweighting capabilities and understanding what the role of data in music is. And I think the most important thing, whether you're a rights holder, whether you are a brand looking to partner, or a streaming platform, wherever you fit in that ecosystem, the fan is ultimately at the center of that. They're the person who you want to understand and help connect to music and to your business. So we're going to be talking with this panel around how exactly that works, and what we can learn from really pushing that, both from what we learn within the music industry, but also potentially looking outside the industry for those that are perhaps very mature with data and have learned some of the challenges and how to overcome them as well. So I'm going to start off, I talked a little bit again about that ecosystem. So we've got musicians themselves, we've got publishers, we've got rights holders, we've got brands, venues. Can you, just understanding how can how data can benefit each of those. And I'm not asking like literally for you to remember each one, but maybe if you can just pick your favourite example across that of where you think data has been really brilliantly applied. And Hazel.
Well, yeah, and obviously I'm going to be incredibly selfish and talk about my own examples. But the reason that I started an AI company 4 years ago is because of the shift in data. So, of course, nobody here knows my entire work history, but my first ever job was I used to work at HMV on Oxford Street. And for anyone who's old enough to remember, and some people in the audience, yes, some know, all new music used to come out at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. If you wanted a new CD single or cassette, you had to queue up outside HMV. Shutters are open, CDs are on the shelf. And I know that because I was the person stacking the shelves on a Sunday night when we shut the shop. And that was new music. 5 singles a week, maybe 10 in the lead up to Christmas, all trying to get that #1 single. And that was great. That was how the industry worked for many years. But, you know, Spotify just announced a couple of weeks ago they have 100,000 songs a day uploaded to their platform. So there's now more music released every day than used to come out in a year in the kind of Western music sphere. So I'm excited. I'm glad that now pretty much anyone with a low-end smartphone can record music, create a track, upload music. You know, we see these amazing artists coming out of nowhere. The gatekeepers are no longer the gatekeepers. But what's been a challenge for the music industry is we haven't moved as quickly as the artists have, which is so common. Industry always lags a little bit behind the creativity of artists sometimes. So the idea for Museo came out of this story, which is, I'm so glad there's so much music, but if there's too much and you can't manage that volume of music, then you miss every opportunity. So that's kind of my favorite example of how that insight of how the industry's changed over the last 10 years.
Got it. Thank you, Hazel. And David, I mean, who out there do you think is doing it best and why?
I come at things from the artist angle, and for me, nowadays, an artist can have a much clearer view, not just on who their audience is today, but on who their audience should be or could be tomorrow. And then, by understanding that audience, they can do everything differently to go get them. So, back in the music industry, like 10 years ago, I worked with David Guetta and Snoop Dogg, for example, on exactly this problem. And for David Guetta, it was about going much more mainstream, but not too mainstream. And so who is that audience? What brands make sense to go after? Which brands are too mainstream? But how can he get out of his comfort zone of electronic music into mainstream culture, but not too mainstream? And for Snoop, it was the exact opposite problem. How could he get a really niche, young, cool audience? That was his big opportunity. And once you plant those seeds in the artist's mind, once they're very clear on what that target audience looks like, they can make better brand decisions, better media decisions, better marketing decisions. They can write different music that better engages that target audience. So for me, real clarity on audiences and then having a strategy that goes and gets those audiences is absolutely transformational when it works.
Thank you. And Di?
I'm really loving how emerging tech are blending with audiences and artists. And people don't talk around this with data because I'm obsessed about data. Obviously, I just see data. But if you look at Travis Scott in Fortnite, that was an entirely metaverse-led experience, fan and artists all in the digital land. And we had one recently with Bastille that WPP did with Epic. And Bastille were in real life performing, but the fans were in the metaverse. And then you've got ABBA and their avatars, and the ABBA don't want to perform, but they took 9 months to create digital human concert, but the fans are real. And I absolutely love the breadth and the flexibility of that, because there is somebody is driving insights on what's the right platform, what's the right, who needs to be real, who doesn't need to be real, and how can that be an authentic experience. And I love that.
Cool, thank you. And I mean, Hazel, you mentioned maybe the industry has been lagging a little bit. I mean, it has obviously been a very fast-paced change. What do you see that are the kind of main barriers and challenges that the industry faces to really kind of getting the most out of data?
Yeah, there's quite a few. But I'm thinking, you know, the biggest one I'm focused on especially in the use of artificial intelligence, is volume. That is one of the biggest challenges. And I knew about this before I sold my company to SoundCloud, but they had Lewis Capaldi on the platform. And he was just releasing music, and there was a manager, his manager, who decided to spend 7 months on SoundCloud trying to listen to everything that had less than 20 plays. And he found Lewis, listened, sent him a message, the rest is history, so they say. But the fact that he was sat on SoundCloud, undiscovered for 7 months, and with no hope in finding him other than somebody manually trawling for 7 months, that to me is the missed opportunity. And we're also kind of big believers at SoundCloud we're sort of taking a bet that if music cycles in sort of 10-year gaps, we had, 10 years of music retail CDs, we had 10 years of music downloads, 10 years of streaming, and then the next 10 years, our bet is that it is the artist-to-fan connection. That is going to be the most important part for the next 10 years.
Got it, thank you. And what are your thoughts in terms of challenges and barriers in the industry?
I think one of the barriers is honestly asking smart questions. And we've never had so much data at our fingertips, but partly it's hard to get to. So I probably use about 10 different analytics platforms, depending on the question and the nuance and maybe even the genre of artist I'm working with. But that's all well and good if you know where to go get the data to answer the questions. But if the questions aren't very good in the first place, then it's a very simple set of mistakes get made. So when brands say who's got the biggest audience, instead of saying who's got the biggest audience in the territory where my brand is present, that's a pretty fundamental mistake that I see absolutely all the time. When the brand asks for a demographic, instead of like an interest-based affinity group, which is much richer and more actionable audience, that's a mistake I see all the time. And when the brand asks for growth in metrics instead of, as Pete said before, I think, but instead of authentic engagement that's meaningful and will translate into brand perception or sales, like that's a mistake as well. But so many brand deals, even if they start off with all the best will in the world of being very strategic, by the time the artists get picked or the deal gets assessed, the metrics are so simplistic. We're not asking the right questions that we're not being as clever or strategic as we could do. We're not having the impact that we could. So asking the right questions and then having an analyst who's got enough systems and processes to be able to actually answer those questions, like get really good at that is my strong advice.
Yeah, and there are obviously some businesses out there, if you think of the Spotifys, the YouTubes, in particular the streaming platforms, they're obviously sitting on a lot of data. Not all that data is shared with everybody. You're talking about, the connection between artist and fan being huge, a huge opportunity. So, maybe that data isn't as shared and portable as it might be. I mean, I think, Di, you've scanned a lot of different industries and sectors and kind of come across similar challenges in your time. How have other industries kind of overcome those types of challenges?
So I say the same thing to every person that I do any data consultancy for, and that's you don't have all the data you need, but you don't use all the data you have. And actually thinking about what data you have that a different department might be using, that actually they might see it as supply chain data or call center data, or you've got your social media team are looking at signals and responding, that actually could be really powerful to feed into the marketing team, or what messaging or what words you're using. So that's where I always start with everyone. But I can see quite a lot of similarities with the music industry and actually consumer packaged goods, because both have an intermediary in the middle that kind of controls the relationship between the fan and the brand. And for consumer packaged goods, they've got retailers, and they're allowed to buy that data on who's bought their own product. That is a very well-established and very lucrative market. But you don't actually get to see that connection. It's not a two-way connection. And everybody I speak to feels like they're behind in their data journey. And I'll give you an example. I spoke to the chief digital officer of a toothpaste company. They sell 2 billion packs of toothpaste a year. And I said, what does your best customer look like? And she went, how on earth would I know that? And actually, I could totally see why that's reality. But everybody be reassured that nobody's nailed this. Nobody's nailed this at all. Data is not rocket science. It's actually harder than rocket science, because we've successfully put a man in a rocket and sent him to the moon and back, and we've done that before any single company has sorted out all their data problems. So I don't know if that was reassuring, but that's the reality, I'm afraid.
No, not really. Thank you anyway, Di.
I've got a theory about the toothpaste. Cohort, people with teeth.
I mean...
Too broad?
I think so, really.
Right, okay, not taking anyone's job anytime soon, don't you worry. But no, I'm sort of fascinated by what you can do with the data, and actually a really prescient example, the Spotify Wrapped campaign is live right now. This is fresh news. So everyone's sharing to Instagram who they've listened to, what they've done, etc. And I've heard, but I've not thoroughly researched yet, but that for the first time ever, Spotify are allowing their biggest artists to send direct messages to their biggest listeners, which, big if true, but because that has previously been data. You know, I think when we spoke about a week ago, I was like, they never do it, they never allow it, they would never, that's their data. But if they are starting to allow it, obviously they're going to gatekeep it. Biggest artists in the world, biggest listeners in the world, probably only through platform, right? They're not going to give them their emails or something like that.
I suspect not.
Exactly. So if they can control that data, then of course they will. But I must admit, we're sort of trying to pitch ourselves at SoundCloud as we already give all that information to artists as a default, because we believe the ability to connect with your super fans is more important. You know, you can build a better relationship and a better career as an artist if you can directly contact your fans. So we're keen to facilitate that.
Got it. And I guess, you know, whether it's a streaming platform or you run a venue, I mean, you mentioned that you see that as a big opportunity. But do you see that really happening that much at the moment, or do you just see that as an area where everyone's going to have to go?
Oh, interesting. Honestly, it totally blew my mind when I heard that Spotify had rolled it out like 2 days ago to allow a direct connection between the fan and the artist. I know that we're going to be championing it, and that's going to be our main theory at SoundCloud, that being able to connect artists directly with their fans and have brands be a part of that relationship is going to be the future of the next 10 years. I think that, you know, Spotify are also famous for trialing stuff and, you know, going big or walking it back, because they are also very data driven. That's meant to be a compliment in case it didn't sound like it was. It is a compliment. You know, they do what works, and they are more a tech company than a music company in a lot of ways. So I always keep an eye on the competition and see what's happening in the market.
Thank you. And, you know, David, you mentioned you've got to piece together data from 10 plus systems. What kind of, maybe you can help give some of your sort of insider information, as much as you're willing to let go, about what do you see as the most valuable data sources for the music industry, the ones that you're kind of go-tos, and why?
Yeah, it's a good question. And the answer is interesting, I think, because the answer is it's mostly not music-related data sources. So social media analytics is far more powerful, far richer, far more available, can be cut in far more different ways than any of the music data can. So if the question, for example, is how, in the UK, which electronic music artist has a cool following amongst a certain type of person, there's absolutely no way to answer that question using music industry data. I think there's any way to, I'm just checking. I don't think there's any way to answer that, but absolutely can be answered with social data. And you can say, furthermore, you can say, what's the overlap between that audience and a whole basket of brands that I might ask to work on the event with me? And you can measure pre-event versus post-event, whether the brand following increased or decreased amongst that target audience. You know precisely how influential that audience is in terms of the number of followers and the shareability of their content, all this good stuff. So you can be, have laser precision and measurement on the social side. None of that's possible on the music side. So social.
Got it. Thank you. I guess just switching track a little bit. I mean, if you're a brand and you're on the lookout for partnership opportunities, I mean, listening to the sort of panel earlier, it sounds like you've got a lot of experts on, particularly on the, I guess, the rights holding side, but I'm sure perhaps on the brand side as well. And obviously, with a lot of experts, there's a lot of opinions about who the right, what the right matchup is. But where do you start as a brand if you want to back up those kind of opinions, expert opinions, with some actual hard data? Maybe just sort of ask that to all of you. Maybe start with Hazel.
Yeah, of course. You just put me very much in mind of a blog post we did at Museo maybe a year or two ago when, so we were a Singapore-based startup. We were there for 4 years, and we decided to write an article about what does car advertising in Malaysia sound like? So the AI technology we have works directly on the audio files itself, so an MP3 or a WAV. So we went to YouTube and we found as many car adverts as we could, all different brands, but all that ran in Malaysia, all in the same year. And we basically used AI to analyze the actual audio files of all these tracks and looked for commonalities. And so might not be a surprise to anyone in the room who's ever worked on maybe a car campaign. 100% of them were instrumental. Something like 90% of them were in a major key. There were certain genres that you saw more often than others. And there was a couple of key insights. And we sort of just did this for a piece of fun because we were like, maybe it would be interesting to use AI to kind of find stuff out about audio. What does this say about the brands? And we've used that piece of research in previous years to go, if you take it to a new car company and go, hey, this is exactly the status quo, this is what you should be doing. But you could also flip it and say, you could do the opposite. And then you'd be totally different to what everyone else is doing. So the interpretation and the question, as David got to before, sometimes becomes more interesting. Got
it. And have you got any advice for brands in terms of where to start with data?
I very much do.
Silly question. It's kind of your job.
I mean, I think it starts with asking the right question. So I think there's at least two to ask. One is, what type of audience do I want to reach? That's the type of person. It's not a demographic, although that's fine if that's all you've got. Preferably it's a bit more rich about interests and lifestyle and aspirations, and describe the audience you want to reach in as rich a way as possible. That's one dimension. The second dimension, what relationship do you want to change between them and your brand? Do you want to drive awareness of your brand, in which case you're looking for people who've never heard of you? Do you want them to change perception of your brand? And then, and only then, you should ask yourself, using data, which music brands, which gatekeepers, which festivals, or which magazines, or which venues have that audience? Or which artists, we'll come to that anyway, via the festivals and the magazines, but which artists have that audience? And then you're reaching the right audience through the right gatekeepers to reach the audience that you want and to do the things that you want to do. Furthermore, you can measure the change over time as well. I think those things are rarely done all together, but they're absolutely possible. I would definitely do that. So, for example, one alcohol brand I'm working with is working with one music organising group, and their goal was to change the perception of their brand amongst very, very cool people. And so, all right, well, how do we, amongst this audience, right, what artists they listen to? Well, it's not big mainstream artists, it's super niche artists, right? Go find all the right audience, all the right artists that appeal to that audience, and then you're reaching the right audiences and changing the brand perceptions in exactly the right way. So just be very strategic about it and ask the right questions.
Cool, thank you.
Huge crossover with people with teeth. Massive Venn diagram.
I think so. I think
we're onto something here. This is going to take off.
You heard it here first.
Maybe a slightly different question for you. Now, obviously, with the cost of living crisis, how do we think that's going to affect the music industry, and what role do you think data can play to give an advantage? Maybe sort of Di, if you can tackle that one.
I mean, it's not particularly surprising, which actually insights generally aren't, but the IFPA did some research and they found out that 69% of their respondents linked music to mental health. So I think the role of music to help steer and unify, and David, you talked a lot about community. I think to make people feel less alone, it has such a role to play. I think maybe people might pay less for streaming. So there may be some shift, and I think data has a role to play on navigating people through the different means to connect with music that they can afford. And I think there's some ethics in that on how you might do price optimization. We do a lot of work here on making sure it's always ethical. It's not making a judgment on someone's postcode or what someone's bought before. We're not making a judgment like that on what people can pay when we're doing any price optimization. And so I think there's going to be if they want to be authentic, it's got to be, you find the fans where they are, and you think about, go back to David's point, what do you want them to do, and then you reward the behavior you seek is a mantra that I've had throughout my whole data career, and actually to set a strategy. What do you want people to do, and how are you going to reward or thank them or have that value exchange? I think that's going to be really important.
Thank you. Cool.
Yeah, and I think by really understanding lots of different audiences, you can do something called de-averaging, which is that you can give a really low price way of accessing your music to a bunch of different audiences, and then and make a lot of money from all the ones that can still afford it. And there's going to be plenty of people in this downturn who can still afford it. So I sat with a brand a couple of days ago. It's 16 different electronic music audiences to choose from. This is UK only as well. And there's 3 or 4 of them who are super passionate about the music, but they're relatively low income by the look of it. And so one strategy to really maximize how you engage that audience, and you don't worry about monetizing that audience, you worry about reach and you worry about engagement. But there were 2 or 3 other segments that were really attractive to the brand. One super interested in fashion, for example. That's not somewhere you economize by trying to give them low price versions of experiences or concerts and things. So you can monetize them. On average, your price is still quite high, but you're letting people who can't afford it access at super low cost, and you're monetizing people who have got the money and are willing to spend it on premium experiences. So.
Cool, thank you. I think we're actually going to take some questions from the audience now. So I think our magic microphone dice is going to be coming the way of anyone who'd like to stick their hand up and ask any of these people a question.
Yeah, just a quick one. There's a lot of stuff in the press or stuff I'm reading at the moment, research, about there being a real restructuring of what fandoms and fan bases look like. So going from, individual stars to massive fan communities to lots of different artists building smaller fan communities. Is that an opportunity for brands, and how do you sort of navigate this shift, which seems to be pretty major?
Who would like to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, because you can be more targeted than ever. So you can put together, if you're a brand now, you can, again, say which audience do I want to reach? And then instead of saying who's the biggest artist that has that audience, you can say, hey, give me 10 artists who collectively add up to as much of that audience as possible. And you can partner with 10 niche artists who are super passionate fan bases, all of which complement each other with as little overlap as possible, but who collectively add up to reaching your total addressable audience. Now that's much more work. You've got to have 10 relationships with 10 artists and 10 authentic connections and partnerships there. So I'm not saying that's easier than one massive artist, but it's certainly going to be much bigger impact. And those artists can be much more grateful for your support and your ability to help them to grow their career. So it's going to be a much deeper relationship as well. But that kind of targeting is absolutely possible.
Thank you. I think in the red shirt, I think you had a question.
Hello. I have a question about sort of the algorithms that different fans will generate with their platforms, and how data might be used to navigate them towards sort of new genres of music where the music they tend to listen to might develop something of an echo chamber of, oh, you listen to this, now you should listen to this, which is quite similar. How might you open these doors to sort of new realms of music?
Yeah, so I've spent a lot of my time in music streaming. Could do a whole topic just on this. It depends, which is always the answer, which is, I'm like a music super fan, and I don't really use any of the streaming services to tell me what to listen to, because when I want to listen to music, I already know what I want to listen to. But I've worked in the industry for 15 years. I am not the average consumer. And when you talk to other music people, they are not the average consumer. Same with people at labels or artist managers. The average person, like 90% of listeners, enjoy that lean back, you like this, so you will also like experience. And it's why Spotify's weekly discovery and Pandora radio stations do so well, because not everyone is a super uber committed curator style engagement. All of the companies do it differently. Spotify bought my biggest competitor and took it off the market. That's how they do weekly discovery. Good news for me. And Pandora do it by, I used to work at Pandora, so they do it by, they have humans grading every single audio track on 350 points of musical DNA, and then they use those 350 points to match up what sounds like each other. At Museo, we do it using AI fingerprints. So there can be many different approaches, but ultimately it's all about hitting the metric, which at Pandora, we used to call it TSL, time spent listening. The more someone listens, the more ads you can serve them, the more money you make. At SoundCloud, it's not necessarily length of time listening, it's quality and engagement. So we have commenting on platform, we have following of artists. Those are metrics that we're more interested in.
Can I just say quickly, I think that it's key to have a balance between creativity and data as well, though, and in algorithms as well. So don't just give people what you think they want, surprise and delight them. And human curation is another aspect of it. So McKinsey says that companies that harness the creativity and data alongside each other grow twice as quickly as companies that don't. I think that's true of companies, it's true of music businesses, and it's true of every industry. So definitely all the data we've just talked about, you're an idiot if you don't have all of that, but you also should have an equally well-powered creative vision and music experts who challenge that and add in exciting other elements to your plans as well.
And I think that's so true, because I think if, like, say I wanted a playlist. I'm a big classic rock fan. I want a classic rock playlist. I reckon if I just asked David to build a playlist for me, it would be way better than anything an AI could do. And usually if you want something super bespoke, a human will do a much better job. But the problem is if you have 10 million daily active listeners, you can't do a one-for-one personal experience for all of them. So it's the blend of the two things.
Humans and AI. It's not humans or AI.
Love it.
There we go.
And people with tea.
It's getting some happy vibes here. Have we got? I think we've got time for maybe one more question. Anyone on hands up? If you've got any other questions, go on.
Yeah. So with the proliferation of TikTok and just the way sounds go quite viral almost overnight, how does that kind of affect the music industry and brand partnerships? And also the second question is on just the popularity of just unique sound. So even sounds just getting viral, people just saying random noises, and then how would that kind of work for a brand in the future?
I personally am super into meme culture. In fact, I was sat in the office today and we were playing Show Me Your Favorite Video under 7 seconds. And there's one of a kid and he spells out Nutella on the jar and then he yells peanut butter. That was someone else's favorite. My favorite is the guy from Storage Wars where he says, "What's your profanity?" I don't know if anyone knows these super weird niche audio memes. So I kind of think that it has a place. We're already seeing kind of a shift in the type of music that is produced based on the popularity of song segments. If you're going to get 30, 45 seconds on TikTok, you need to drop in a song at a certain point. We also use AI technology to manage this as well. A major label who shall remain nameless, it's one of 3, they sent 50,000 tracks through to TikTok and asked them to chop each one starting at 48 seconds. That's dumb data. I mean, sure, like a broken clock is right twice a day, but like if you could just use AI to automate finding the best section in a song, and we could do 50,000 tracks in a day easily, like that is a better approach.
Yeah, I think that TikTok is making the industry very, very reactive, which is exciting, definitely, and offers unique opportunities, which I probably won't comment on. I would say that TikTok's success is not as correlated with long-term artist success as you might want it to be, and so there's still a role for, you guessed what I'm going to say, like strategic artist development, despite TikTok. So yeah, it's important to ride the trends, but it's also important to build artists strategically and carefully over the long term and invest in them.
Cool. Well, I think we are out of time, but thank you, everyone, and thank you particularly to the panellists.